Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate it. I just thought, obviously, this is my first full recruiting class. I think about, today, the 15th, and being 4 days short of a year ago since I took the job. This is a full cycle in a year. I always kind of talk in terms of being a happy new year from a coach's standpoint, because this is really, truly the start of a new recruiting class moving forward. But because of the NCAA rules, because of the portal world, and a lot of other things in between, it goes on probably far beyond this signing date, as you can imagine. We are going to sign a majority of our guys in this class, obviously with the 22 guys that we had signed with us today, but still have the opportunity for more in the future. Because of NCAA rules, I can't talk about guys that could potentially be here through the transfer portal in January until they start classes here as we go forward. So have the addition of making this class a little bit bigger as we go. Guys that have entered the transfer portal for us, but also guys that have declared for the NFL, allow us to gain back some scholarships so we go forward past the normal 25. So, I think about this day starting the day I took the job with some phone calls to Illinois high school coaches immediately that day before I did any media or did anything other than reach out to a bunch of Illinois high school coaches, really in-state, downstate, everywhere in between, and it's kind of carried forward with a lot of different phone calls to high school coaches. I can't tell you how many Zoom calls I've done in that Zoom room with our staff. Unofficial visits. It started with players coming to campus. Actually started with when we're still into the dead period where, though we couldn't be with a prospect, we knew that they were coming to campus. We'd kind of guide them as best we can within the NCAA rules, but we couldn't see them face to face. So very unique time in this recruiting process. And then to have the camps open up in June where we could actually have guys on campus for one-day camps, one-day evals, really a one-time wonder, I think. We had a couple players that are actually in this signing class as a result of that. And then obviously when official visits began, to have some of those guys hit campus for the first time where we could make it tangible, where we see them in person, live, face-to-face, has been a full circle. And really, I look at it as 22 signees, right? 21 high school kids, one junior college player, but 15 offensive players, 7 defensive players. You can group this class in a variety of different ways. I do think there's some offensive guys that have defensive talent. I think there's some defensive guys that have offensive talent, which we'll see here in a minute when we go through the film. I think about this, right? 3 countries, United States, Canada, and Denmark. Not many times you can say that. One of the first guys to sign his papers last night was obviously here at the University of Illinois. 3 countries, 8 states, but really 10 players from the state of Illinois. And as I said in our opening press conference where we are today, that's going to be the staple of what we are. Those 10 players from the state of Illinois represent 5 state titles during their career. Several conference championships, and obviously the big state championships. But I also look at it this way, right? We got 5 guys from the Catholic League in Chicago. Ever since I've been a young coach to where I am today, people come into the state of Illinois from across the country to recruit the Catholic League in Chicago, and to have 5 players represented in that league. And then also talked about how we're going to recruit the state from tip to tip. And to have Hank Beatty be the Gatorade Player of the Year and have him signed here at the University of Illinois. I didn't obviously do that in the intention of signing Hank that hoped that he became a Gatorade Player of the Year. It was just a byproduct of him playing really good football. And that's the first time that's been done, I believe, since 2010 with Riley O'Toole. So to have the player in the state who's recognized as a Gatorade Player of the Year come here to Illinois is huge, right? 172 wins, 68 losses, 1 tie. We put an emphasis on winning. In your background, it's not an all be-all, right? But we want to win here, and I think to change the culture of what's been behind us, we have to cultivate on the front end. So the more kids that understand what winning is coming on the front end and won't tolerate losing, I think goes a long, long way. So there is an emphasis on going after championship-type programs. But we also recruited a young man here as of late who hasn't won a high school game in his career, right? It's not an like I say, all and be all, but that's a huge, huge deal. We had 4 guys with undefeated seasons in this class, right? So they didn't lose a game unblemished where it goes, and then several with just 1 or 2 losses on the entire senior season. So very excited to get this group in the room. I'll really get specific when we're going through the film, but there's so many different stories that go with this recruiting class. Again, a lot of it was unique in the fact the very first time we ever saw him was on those official visits, so we'd gotten to know him through Zoom through phone calls, through text, through FaceTimes, kind of a moving world in a world of recruiting. But there's always an emphasis on that 48-hour period, but nothing like probably this year than ever before. I knew those kids were going to be starving. They've never been really recruited over the last year and a half of their life. So to get them here on campus, for us as coaches, we were new to campus as well, so we really had to rely on, for instance, Josh, right, as our athletic director, but also someone that walked the walk here, that has been in charge of the athletic department, that knows exactly what these kids are going to be looking for. Corey Patterson, who's a holdover from our last staff, Pat Embleton, who's our director of recruiting, and just kind of what's been done in the past. But I thought it was very interesting for us as new coaches. We probably brought a perspective that no one else could provide, right? We saw things that no one else had seen. We saw strengths, we saw weaknesses. One of the first things I did is move the hotel location of our recruits. I just felt like if you bring a young man in from a certain part of the country and put him downtown in Champaign, that would be a positive thing for us, right? So we did some things logistically. Coach Underwood allowed us to come into the basketball arena and have a breakfast, on an academic breakfast on the floor actually in the basketball arena, and just really kind of started the day off with a little different pizzazz that had never been really accomplished before. So a partnership with basketball, as well as many other people on campus, from everything, how we ate to where we ate, to Coach McDonald being a former player. He had a perspective that none of us had, and his Hall of Fame campus tours on a golf cart, I quickly heard a lot about. I never got invited for one, but hope to in the near future. So just the attention to detail. I told our coaches early on, because we don't have the wins to back it up, the difference has to be us, right? The difference has to be how we present ourselves, the relationships we build, and the way that we can put ourselves in front of these young men, but also their families moving forward. So before I move on to some questions, and then we'll get into film, when you guys got your questions done, I can come back at the back end as well. Just want to say thank you to Josh and administration. Everything since we've been here has been, what can we do, what can we do, what can we do? Very few no's along the way, just bent over backwards to give us the resources to do it, including this last week, being able to be everywhere across the country where we need to be. To my staff, I had them all sitting here in the back of the room. I do want them to have a chance to speak to you on the back end. They're the guys that were doing the grunt work on a daily basis, from endless text conversations and setting up Zooms and details and follow-up and creativity. Just an unbelievable staff to be around. And our recruiting staff, Pat Embleton and his crew, assembled a group of guys really that came in. I knew my 10 coaches were going to be in effect on this program immediately, from my coordinator to the last guy I hired, but I knew that recruiting personnel department was going to be huge. Didn't know Pat Embleton coming into it. He's a guy that had been here for, I believe, 8 years prior to that, had been in a variety of different roles, and I could just see as we worked through several weeks, this is a guy I wanted to put my arm around and put my recruiting department in his hands. Brought in several guys that have been a part of my past. Pat Pearson, who had been with me at Arkansas, came from Oregon, and a lot of stuff you see with our NIL, social media, just all the events of this morning. There's a lot of things that Pat has his hands. Jay Kaiser, a guy that I've been with at the past, that was in the NFL, has really been in charge of our transfer portal. Nate McNeil, who had been here in the past. We're looking for a certain type of role to be filled to work hand in hand with Pat Embleton, and Nate has been a champion on that, to bring in Coach Ryan, an Illinois high school coach, and to let him have an effect on our program on a daily basis, somebody that knows this place better than anybody. What's better way to relate to Illinois high school coaches than to hire one of the best ones there ever was. Terry Hawthorne, a former player, and because of us hiring him from where he was at in East St. Louis, that prevented us, in theory, from being able to go back in there. There's some new changes that have allowed schools, we saw that evident today, where schools can maybe go in and recruit players that have had past relationship with high school coaches, so that's an option that we'll explore. But and then just some other, valuable pieces of the program here that have been huge. So I really want to say thanks to that group and move forward. So with that, I'll open it up for some easy questions. Yes.
Much of your career has been spent with that February,
Yes.
one day Sunday day. Now, the last 4 years, it's early Sunday day too. What's your thoughts on this whole process?
So I didn't get to sign them, right, but I had prepared for an early signing day, my last job. Really the only significant thing to me, right, is that the whole timetable moved up quite a bit. But I think back to last year, we didn't use all of our scholarships up for a reason. The last year, the two kids that I signed on national signing were two guys that probably played the most amount of snaps for us. Josh McCray was obviously a huge part of not only what we did last year, but what we're going to do in the future. And Dwayne Johnson, got considerable reps for us, especially early on. So I didn't want to tap us out because I do think there's going to be good players available for that second signing. I think you got to be selective about that. We've actually probably front-loaded a lot more high school players than you'll see a lot of people do. I believe in a development program. Even the players, I'm concerned about the portal, but I'm not overly concerned, right? Even the players that entered the portal for us right now, literally every one of them came in and almost borderline apologized. Like, Coach, I don't want to do this, but this is something I have to do, and gave me great reasons and worked through it. There weren't any hostile moments or anything of anything more than just trying to do what's best for everybody involved. The only thing that I really regret is we had a 2-week window to recruit before today, and I wasn't able to get in every home of the kids that we signed here today. We put a huge emphasis. 9 of our players that we signed today will be on campus in January. I only had 10 really, really working days, 10 to 11 working days, so I couldn't get in every home. And that's when you really get to know them, right? Like everybody always says, what's your best recruiting stories? And by far, they're on the home visits, right? It's when you as a head coach get to go to the home, you get to know them on their terms, right? Like anybody they come here, they're kind of your guest, right? Like even official or unofficial, everybody's got a different feel. But when you go to that home, now you're in an environment where they're comfortable, right? And you get to know the crazy uncle that no one talks about, right? You get to see the pet selection. You get to, I've had everything from possum stew to traditional American meatloaf, right? Anywhere in between. So you really get a different perspective when you're in that home, and that's really the only biggest difference for me is I can't wait to get out in January. A simple thing like we're going alphabetical orders. The first guy that we're going to talk about here is Isaiah Adams, right? Who's a Canadian, right? That played at Garden City Junior College, and one of the comments I said to him the day that I went to see him in Garden City, I sent Coach Miller to Canada, right? Because you have to see him on the same, in the same window. And I think about this all the time. Like I told him specifically when he was here on the visit this past weekend, I wasn't able to go see your mom. You come to us, and I'm going to go see your mom the first opportunity I get because she's important to you. She's important to me, right? I've talked to her on the phone, and I just think that family atmosphere builds into everything we do. Yeah.
This is obviously your biggest stamp on the roster so far. The first class is kind of known as a foundation. What do you look for? What is important? What is significant about that first class and building forward?
Yeah, the question is what's significant about this first class, right? And I think it embodies what we believe in, right? We have a strong foundation of defensive linemen and offensive linemen, especially offensive linemen. We signed 5 high school players, 1 college player, just because of pure numbers. I know there's a big to-do about what I said during the course of the year, but it really was based on we need numbers. I knew I was losing, potentially 5 of the top 6 players in that group. So to get them and build them has been a huge part of this class. I'm not a big believer in signing multiple quarterbacks in the same class. Like I get it. Like last year I added, obviously they signed a high school quarterback for us here and I added Art into it. This year we obviously signed Donovan and we may add a more senior transfer player. But I think the important to get a quarterback that kind of fits into what we're doing. I think Donovan did that. We got 2 running backs, kind of like a big and little version, right? Like I've really had success in my career in everything, every size of running back known to man, and I think that was a big part when we got Jordan, got Aiden, 2 in-state players that have played at the highest level, have been huge. Defensively, we knew it was going to be a smaller class, the players that we added. I think premier-wise, to add Jared Beatty and Gabe Akis at the outside linebacker, that's a position that I really feel strong about, the type of defense we play with Ryan and that crew. Coach Kane, the development of, I think the 2 most improved players on our defense were OC and Isaiah, and I think we really started playing good when they started playing well. And to have those 2 guys coming in as true freshmen outside linebackers is really special. We beat them on SEC competition at the last minute, really almost the same school for both of them. So to feel good about that position, really our latest addition last night to add James Crouch, who's a guy that I fell in love with when I watched his film in late October, early November. I couldn't tell you how excited I was to make that call to offer him and get him to be a part of our family. So I think they represent our kind of guys. I always tell that to and our coaches when they come off the road and maybe they meet someone for the first time, they'll say, hey, Coach, he's our kind of guy. and I automatically know what that means. They know what it means. On the same side of it, they'll say, Coach, he's not our kind of guy, and I got it, right? So we've only been together a year, but I think we all kind of know what that means.
Interior defensive line wasn't addressed in this signing classes. Was that by design because of the numbers, and is it a position you're going to continue to look at throughout the winter and spring?
Yeah, I think, obviously last year signed Said before I got here, right? And he's a guy that's been very intriguing to me during the fall. He has some tremendous upside that I think we can't wait to capitalize on. We actually, how should I say this? We're not done, right? So like anything that isn't covered can be covered in the near future. And then obviously transfer portal things, even guys that have, I think traditionally used to think portal is 1 year, 2 year remaining. Now you can get guys that have 3 and 4 years of eligibility remaining, especially with this COVID world. So it's a very unique time in that world.
To build the chemistry of certain position groups. I'm thinking offensive line and defensive line. The kids you signed, I'm thinking guys like Clayton and Joey and Hunter being able to get on a group chat or get on a Zoom and having the families have chemistry before they even show up here.
Yeah, so when we first got going this class, there was actually limits on the number of players you could have on one group message, right? As silly as that is, right? And that's evolved now during the course of time. But one of the things I give Nate a lot of credit. Nate especially drove some of the in-state recruiting in the Chicagoland group. So, Beatty, the JCA boys, and Ian kind of connected right away. And we had a Zoom call where I remember it was just us, right? And it was just me and those guys talking about the Illinois boys. And then we had a 4 core down below. We got 3 of those 4 down here in Illinois. But really just the amazing part for me really was when we got out on the road and started recruiting in December, and I started hearing stories when I was in the homes from these parents. Magnus Moller, right? So he's a kid from Denmark that got added late here in the class. Every home I went into, every parent and every kid, offense, defense, if I'm in Illinois, if I was in Florida, talked about him, right? And just his personality, his demeanor, and they have this huge group chat going on. And even just as recent as yesterday when we pulled a guy out of that group chat, right, that didn't want to, wasn't going to sign with us, everybody right away had to know the answer, right? So I knew they're communicating basically, essentially, instantly on every action. To see on social media when I see Donovan O'Leary, in the middle of November, comment on something that Joey Okla did, or Jared Beatty comment on something that Ian Pugh did, or really when Sean Miller, who's down in IMG and was amidst all their memories, like it's undeniable that the more relationships we can build during the recruiting process only help. We were a 5-7 team overall, but there was a while there where things weren't going exactly great, and to have really just one player remove himself from our commitment list, I think speaks a lot to our coaches, but really to our recruits on who they stand for and what they represent.
Bret, you had a lot of these guys committed for a pretty good amount of time. What did you like about maybe what these last 4 additions, 2 last night, 2 today, maybe did to this group as a whole?
It was important for us, I think, to start out strong, right? We wanted to get guys that we felt strong about, put our best foot forward. I never really apply pressure. I'm not saying that we don't suggest things, but I think any commitment you get through pressure is usually short-lived, or it's usually under a wrong pretense, right? I want someone to come to you when the time is right. So as they began to come in, we would just kind of feed off it, build off it. Didn't really try to push anybody in a certain direction. I think really about our first bye week, we took an inventory of where we're at. What do we really need to go after now? And then some of it's just timing, right? You look at Tyson Rooks, right? We just literally found out about him about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And somebody connected with Tony, a coach at his high school, reached out to TP. TP gave it to Ryan. Ryan loved the defensive film, passed it on. All of a sudden, there's this buzz in the office about Tyson Rooks, right? And then Gabe Akis, sounds like a joke, right? So I have a buddy named Jack Daniels that is a high school coach down in West Palm Beach who's been a friend of mine for a long time. But he and I met at Dwyer High School in 1996. At his wedding, my wedding, become great friends, and he literally was scouting an opponent and saw Gabe running around, and he hit me up that night. He said, "Bro, I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna want to go look at this kid at Fort Pierce Central." They were playing Lenny Jankowski, who used to be Jack's offensive coordinator. He called me and said, "Hey, you're going to want to look at this." The head coach was actually the coach that accompanied Lenny Jankowski when we were at Wisconsin, beat number 1 Ohio State while we were at home. They came to my house, right? Just like all kinds of these crazy connections that led us to Gabe. And then as soon as I sent Aaron Henry down on Monday during a bye week, as soon as we found out, I sent him there. He obviously eyeballed him. We couldn't talk to him at that point, and just felt really good about what he represented. And all of a sudden, we're in a recruiting battle, and that went down to the last wire here today. But sometimes it's just strictly timing because I come in late.
Early commitments that you guys, or the early enrollees that you guys have, what is it about that you like? And was there a point in your career where you identified that, hey, this is something that we'd like to do as much as we can, as long as we're able to?
Yeah, I think the early commitment thing is, I'm sorry, early enrollment has been a positive. Like, so one of the first kids that I ever had was a guy by the name of Travis Frederick, who ended up being a first-round draft pick. And I really think the advantage of coming in during this January enrollment is they have a slower acceleration to the football world, right? Like, they come in during fall camp, it's like full speed, full garden hose full of information coming at you, right? Fire hose full of information, and you're practicing, and you got games. You're hitting classes for the first time. Now they'll come in January. We'll get about a 4-day orientation. They'll have an 8-week window of preparation with Tank and his crew. We'll slowly involve football. They'll take a week of spring break. They'll come back and have 5 weeks of spring football, 2 weeks of post-spring work in the classroom, go home for 3 weeks, and then come back in the summer and enter with the same freshman class, and go through everything all again. So they really get installed twice. And it just comes at a better pace that I think really, and just human nature, right? Think about when you were 18 years old and you went to college. When you come in during the summer, you come in June, you really don't leave till December. When you come in during January, you get a spring break in 8 weeks. You get a 3-week break in about 6 weeks after that. Then you get another week before we start fall camp. It just breaks up that monotony that much better.
You weren't in this world for the last couple of years, so you weren't recruiting. To get back to it and now have a class, can you just explain or describe what this entire process was like to get back to the world of recruiting?
Yeah, question being, that I was out for 3 years really in the recruiting world. But the way I'm wired, like, I'm recruiting every day, right? Like, I like people. Like learning things from people, and I don't think that really changed, even though I might have been in the New England Patriots facility and I wasn't recruiting to a signing day. I was recruiting players every day, right? Let's get to know each other. Let's build a relationship. Let's see what I can give you. Let's see what you can give me to help each other. So I get the question, but it really, I didn't ever felt like I was out for a day. And then the Zoom world, I'm just telling you, Josh was giving me a tour literally the first day I was here, and that area that I set up as a Zoom room, they never really used, right? And as soon as I walked in, I'm like, ooh, this is a good Zoom room. And everybody's kind of looking at me like I got 3 heads. I'm like, we're going to put a camera there, I'm going to put a table there, and I'm going to be able to show film to my current players, and I'm going to be able to recruit players through Zoom. And we wore that thing out. We've got our money out of that room. So I get the question. I have an unbelievable staff. Like, every home I walk into, like, they know everybody walking in. Every school, they know who's when we walk in the door, how to get to the person that we need to get to. Just the attention to detail from that staff and the planning of it has really been exceptional, and that's probably allowed us to be very successful.
With these 22 and the current NCAA rules, allowing you to go over 25, can you tell us how many more scholarships you have available?
You get 25 by rule, then you get 7 extra. But I had some that I blue shirted from a year ago, and we may choose to use or not use. So it really is a number that I know what it is. I may choose to, reward walk-on scholarships. We will not be able to get to 85 scholarships, just the way the numbers are laid out, which is my biggest concern. Like, everybody wants to talk about NIL and all this stuff. My only concern is this transfer portal and the way that, especially when you're a coach taking over a program. Even when they give us these 7 extended scholarships, you may not be able to get to 85 by addition of players, right? You can award walk-ons, which is what I did, a little bit of last year. But to go out, to me, it should be 1 in, 1 out. Everybody should have 85 scholarships at any given time. To me, there's no other way to go around it. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we don't do it that way. I know there's discussions of like a swinging 50. You can sign 30 1 year and 20 the next year, but that's just ridiculous because you never know. Right now, I had several players, not several, but a couple players go to the NFL. Some expected, 1 or 2 not expected. that, in addition to the portal, plus the guys you're losing, could be a number greater than 32, right? And it's insane that you can't get to 85 salary. It just absolutely, again, I'll say it one time, like, it's like a 7th grade science project, right? You're supposed to have one variable to figure out what the experiment is, right? Like, there's a reason the stuff went boom, right? Like, it's because you put this one ingredient into it. We've got like 4 ingredients. We got COVID year bonus, we got NIL, we got transfer portal, we have grad transfers, and all 4 of those things together are creating an environment that just no one knows what the hell's going on. And that's the one part that gets frustrating.
Early signing day,
Yeah.
get back to one more thing about that. There's been talk about that maybe either being eliminated, or Todd Berry's been talking about maybe moving it a different time. What's your thoughts on that?
I wish they just kind of stay with what they've been doing, right? And just let's stay constant for a while. We've had enough moving parts here in the last 2 years, 3 years that let's just try to stay constant, let things evolve to where it's at, let everybody know the rules. I think the thought is if they moved back to just a February signing period, the kids are still going to enter the transfer portals. Kids are still going to declare for the NFL. Kids are still going to want to have transition. The one thing that the early signing period does, it's a very cost-effective measure. So all these kids that we got now, 22 players, they're locked in. They can't go anywhere. I guess they could enter the transfer portal, which would probably be unheard of, before they even hit campus. But I'm not saying it can't be done either, right? But I think to stay on a steady pace and be consistent would be a really good step in the right direction.
Coach, this
Yeah.
is a good time to transition to
Okay.